Former Attorney General Sir Nicholas Lyle has told Newsnight there are real reasons to think a British businessman may have been framed for a double murder in Miami in 1986. Krishna Maharaj is serving a 50-year sentence in Florida and has always protested his innocence. Last night on Newsnight we saw new evidence which suggests that Mr Maharaj was the victim of a miscarriage of justice. Tonight, in the second of his special reports, Tim Samuels tracks down a man the defence team believes has serious questions to answer about the murders.
Miami in the mid-1980s. A double murder in a hotel room leaves two businessmen dead and another convicted and fighting for his freedom ever since. Krishna Maharaj, once a self-made millionaire from London, who's now spent 18 years in jail in Florida for a crime he vigorously denies. 15 of those years have been on death row.
This should never happen to another British citizen. This is much bigger than I am. Our government should make sure that this never happened to another British citizen.
Yesterday on Newsnight, we saw how Maharaj has 6 alibi witnesses who've placed him 30 miles away from the murders, none of whom testified in his trial, and we raised serious questions about the credibility of the 2 main prosecution witnesses. Tonight, in the second part of this special investigation, could Krishna Maharaj have been framed, and who might actually be responsible for the murders? 18 years after his arrest, Krishna Maharaj's wife Marita is still out in Florida. A remarkable relationship, founded in her faith in his innocence. Thousands of miles from her home in London, Marita has stayed in America to be near him.
Love has loyalty, has trust, has care, and if that doesn't exist in a marriage, then it's not a marriage. It's just a convenience thing. No, I got married to Krish for life. I married him because I loved him, and I will be here as long as he needs me.
Back in London, Krishna Maharaj's case has extensive political support.
This is a case which previously had the support of the present Home Secretary, the present leader of the Liberal Party, the former Attorney General, and the present Mayor of London.
I mean, Mr. Speaker, the short answer is, I don't know about the individual case. I'm perfectly prepared to look into it.
Some 300 politicians from both houses have signed a petition calling for a retrial, and it's not the usual political suspects.
There are real reasons for thinking that he may have been framed, that crucial evidence about the principal prosecution witness may not have been disclosed, indeed was not disclosed, that he was inadequately represented, that the case was handled by a judge who, in the middle of the case, was arrested and subsequently disbarred, and that there are real reasons for all those reasons to think this is a grave miscarriage of justice, which one would hope can be put right.
If there has been a miscarriage of justice, the odds of it being in Florida are way greater than any other state in the US. 3 years ago, I raised the case with Florida Governor Jeb Bush.
What assurance could you give the British public that you might be able to look into this case?
I'll look into it, absolutely. I'm not aware of any petition for me to do so, but you've just petitioned, so I will do it.
3 years on, no concrete action, yet the governor's state has the highest rate of miscarriages in capital cases. Since 1973, 115 innocent people have been freed from death rows across the US, of whom a fifth have been from Florida alone. Florida is the undisputed capital of capital mispunishment. And those odds of a miscarriage seem decidedly more likely looking at the time and place where this crime happened, Miami-Dade County in the late 1980s. Such was the concern about judicial corruption in Dade County that Operation Courtroom was launched to break a long-suspected ring of bent judges on the circuit court. 4 judges were charged with extortion and bribery. And to narrow the focus even further, 3 days into Krishna Maharaj's trial, the judge was arrested and led away in handcuffs, charged with taking a bribe in another case. Following this FBI sting, the judge was later disbarred. Krishna Maharaj claims the same judge twice tried to solicit a bribe from him before the case via intermediaries.
There are very real reasons for thinking that his case should be looked at again by the court, and that if it did, it would probably overturn the conviction.
Was Krishna Maharaj an ideal person to frame for the murders at the DuPont Plaza? After all, he'd had a public falling out with Derek and Dwayne Moo Young over money they owed him, thus providing a ready-made motive. And by arranging for him to be at the hotel room that morning for a meeting which he says he hung around for but never happened, his fingerprints were left at the murder scene. There's clearly more to this crime than was originally presented at the trial. Perhaps the way to unravel the killings is to focus on the victims. In court, Derek and Dwayne Moo Young were presented as an honest father and son with an income of $20,000. But documents found in their briefcase, which were not disclosed at the time of trial, refer to loans worth millions of dollars. A senior manager from the accountancy firm Ernst & Young examined the documents and concluded that it was difficult to rationalise how the Moo Youngs could have become involved in legitimate business dealings of this magnitude. She deduced the Moo Youngs were either selling drugs or planning to launder money. Further probing by Krishna Maharaj's new defence team indicates the Moo Youngs were laundering millions of dollars of drugs money through 2 Panamanian corporations. Indeed, in a sign that perhaps they were swimming in dangerous waters, the Moo Youngs took out million-dollar life insurance policies just weeks before their deaths.
The Moo Youngs were murdered because they were skimming money off the Colombia drug cartels, and we can document the fact that they were taking a percentage of the Colombia drug cartel's money, and we're talking millions of dollars. That's why they were murdered. That's why they took life insurance policies out when they started doing that scam. And they were murdered by the drug dealers, not by Chris Maharaj.
This man in the Bahamas was with the state's main eyewitness and others in the hours after the killings. He says drugs seemed the motivation for murder.
There was no question in my mind, based on the conversation we had at the dinner table, that Eddie was a part of it. And I thought it was simply a drug deal gone bad.
Up near Atlanta in Georgia, there's someone who says the Moo Youngs were selling cocaine just days before they were murdered. George Abshall was running a garage down in Florida at the time. He says he went with the garage owner to the Moo Youngs' house one night.
I was sitting in the car, he went inside.
To the Moo Youngs' house?
Yes. To ask them for 6 to 8 kilos of coke on the arm, which means they'll pay you later. And they told him no and threw him the hell out. That was about 4 or 5 days before the murders.
Perhaps of crucial significance is the man who George Abshall says tried to buy cocaine off the Moo Youngs that night. He is Adam Hussain, a man who Krishna Maharaj's defence team think has some serious questions to answer. Adam Hussain, another Trinidadian who moved to London. He mixed in the same circles as Krishna Maharaj and apparently used to pass himself off as him to get into horse races. There was certainly a similarity between the two of them. At the time of the murders, George Abshall was running Adam Hussain's garage in Florida. He's now revealed some extraordinary allegations about Adam Hussain's movements on the day of the murders. Firstly, he says that morning, Adam Hussain left the garage saying he was off to the DuPont Plaza Hotel. What's more,
Adam had a gun in his desk all the time, and he had a silencer. And after he left that day, the gun and the silencer were gone. I had occasion to go into his office to hunt for a key, opened up the drawer that the gun was in, the gun was gone, and the silencer was gone. And a day or so after the murders, I had occasion to go in there again and open the drawer. The gun and the silencer were back, and when I went back in there about 3 hours later, they were gone. I never saw them again.
the question of the silencer could be critical, as no one heard any shots fired in the DuPont Plaza. George Abshall also claims that Adam Hussain owed the Moo Youngs a substantial amount of money, which is why they wouldn't sell him cocaine on credit. But his most serious allegations come from his account of meeting Adam Hussein on the night of the murders in a diner.
What did he actually say to you?
That he had solved a bunch of his problems that night, that he had come into a great deal of money, a couple $100,000 and some cocaine and what have you, and that he'd had to eliminate a few people to do it.
How did he actually phrase it?
Just like that. He just recently gotten a whole lot of money, a whole lot of coke, and he'd eliminated 2 people that he owed a lot of money to.
And by eliminated, you took that to mean murdered?
Well, being from New York, if you eliminate somebody, you kill them. And from most parts of the country, if you eliminate somebody, you kill them.
Potentially electrifying evidence, yet George Abshall has never testified in court. Krishna Maharaj's new defence team has also been trying to gather further information on Adam Hussein. Something they've turned up is a note recording a conversation the day after the murders between a policewoman and Adam Hussein's then wife. The note apparently records a claim that on the day of the murders, someone calling themselves Adam Hussein rang the DuPont Plaza Hotel and left a message for room 1215, the room where the Mu Youngs were killed. This evidence was not disclosed to Krishna Maharaj's lawyer at the time of the trial.
Adam Hussein has never given a statement to the police, never been put under oath, never talked to anyone of significance in this case, which I wish he would. I suppose someone who had nothing to hide would be a little less nervous about talking to people, but that's a supposition.
Back to the Caribbean in search of Adam Hussein, and to Trinidad, the place Krishna Maharaj left in 1960. It's a small, close-knit island, but finding Adam Hussein is no easy matter. We try around the capital, Port of Spain, and up towards Trin City. We did meet someone who closely knew all the parties involved at the time. He said the local word was that Maharaj had been framed, but wouldn't go on camera or into explicit detail. I did manage to get hold of Adam Hussein on the phone for a short, if not terribly sweet, conversation.
Say again?
Research on what?
I'm doing some research into the, the Mu Youngs and the sorts of business they did.
So what the fuck you calling me for?
After 2 days, another minor breakthrough. The house where Adam Hussein's younger brother Nizam was staying. He said he didn't know where Adam was. Nizam himself has a certain notoriety.
This meeting is in consideration with Imam what time should be executed.
In 1970, Adam Hussein's brothers, Nizam and Arthur, were convicted of one of the most gruesome cases in British history, the kidnapping and murder of Muriel Mackay, wife of the News of the World deputy chairman. They'd planned to kidnap Rupert Murdoch's wife, but snatched the wrong person. It's rumoured the Husseins cut up Mrs Mackay's body and fed it to pigs at their Hertfordshire home.
"3 days in Trinidad and Adam Hussein remains as elusive as ever. Just as you seem to get close to him, he disappears. Having crisscrossed this island in search of him, all the trails now seem to have gone cold."
But just as we're about to leave Trinidad, word comes through that Adam Hussein is at the airport. A dash to the departures area, where we find him about to board a plane.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Tim.
Tim?
I spoke to you last night.
What?
I'm a journalist.
Chief, come up here.
Yeah.
I ain't got a text. I hate no fucking body for him, boy. Leave my asshole alone.
Why were you going to the DuPont Plaza with a gun on the day of the murders? Mr. Stone, why did you go to the DuPont Plaza on the day of the murders with a gun? People talk about you in association with the murder.
I don't care what they do.
Can you explain to me why?
I don't fucking care, you understand me?
Do you have anything
I move
to
my
hide?
face. No.
Can you explain why you were at the DuPont Plaza with a gun?
We boarded the same flight to Florida as Adam Hussein, the man the defence team are highly keen to question.
I'd love to listen to him, but he seems unwilling to talk about it. And while I'm not here to prosecute someone and convict someone based on their silence, it does weigh heavy, perhaps, that he's never been willing to say anything about anything.
When I last saw Krishna Maharaj 4 years ago, we were separated by a pane of glass, one of the restrictions that came with being on death row. 2 years ago, his death sentence was commuted to life because of judicial impropriety. But little has changed in reality. He's moved cells, but is still too afraid to leave it. And with failing health and a 50-year sentence to serve, Krishna Maharaj faces dying in a Florida jail.
I went from living like a prince to existing like an animal on a day-to-day basis. This is the closest thing to hell.
In an unprecedented move, the British government issued a brief calling for a retrial, but there hasn't really been a full-blooded intervention by the government. There's been no approach on a ministerial level.
In terms of what the government can, and I believe should do, they need to be moving towards the option of repatriation. We will run out of legal options, potentially, certainly by the middle of 2005. And at that point, we want the mechanism to be in place that if we do lose, which would be terrible, that the government has already started working towards getting Chris back home.
Keep pushing. Do it politely, courteously, move up to the Foreign Secretary, if necessary, move to the Prime Minister.
A city which once held such appeal for Krishna Maharaj and his wife, now a place they dream about leaving.
Well, my hopes for the future, first of all, that Chris come out of there and we go home and have a quiet, decent life.
Back to London?
Back to London, yeah. Straight away to London.
It's just beyond my ability to comprehend how we can have a judicial system that allows this patent miscarriage of justice to go on after all these years.
I think our government should get involved now. Well, they are involved, but to make sure that this is done as quickly as possible. What you waiting for me to die in here?
Tim Samuels reporting there. We asked the Foreign Office for an interview on this case. They sent us a statement saying they have already taken action in a Florida court, focusing on the failure of the US authorities to notify the British government of Mr. Maharaj's arrest in 1986. And they add, we remain in regular contact with Mr. Maharaj's legal representatives, both in the US and in the UK. We will continue to provide appropriate consular assistance to Mr. Maharaj. Funeral has heard that one of Prince Harry's former teachers secretly recorded a conversation in which he allegedly admits to having been helped with his AS-level art coursework. Sarah Forsyth, who used to work at Eton, is claiming unfair dismissal and sexual discrimination. Both the school and Clarence House have denied her claims, and tonight our correspondent Richard Watson was invited by Prince Charles's staff at Clarence House to hear the tape for himself. Well, Richard, in your new role as royal correspondent, it's pretty unusual to get invited to do all this.
It's extraordinary, Gavin, actually, to be honest. I mean, I was pretty astonished to be invited down there. I think the palace are really worried about a flurry of press headlines which will be coming out tomorrow about this story. And they invited a number of correspondents down there to actually view the tape. I mean, they actually issued a statement tonight and said, Miss Forsyth's lawyers have given the court a brief extract from the tape and placed their own interpretation upon it. This is why we've given the people an opportunity today to hear the tape for themselves.
Well, they're too late to avoid the headlines, as you can see from tomorrow's Sun, which has just arrived. But what was on the tape? What could you hear?
Well, there's several points to make about the tape. I mean, the first thing to say, it is extremely indistinct. And in a number of places, there appears to be breaks in the tape and all sorts of inconsistencies. So that raises a number of questions in its own right. But now, of course, legally, we have to be quite careful of what we say about this, because technically it's contempt of court, and one would imagine that the royal family must be aware of that. But I shall be cautious in what I say. But essentially, having listened to the tape, I don't really think that that the sort of press headlines that we're seeing at the moment are really substantiated by what's on this tape. I mean, there's certainly an argument for that anyway, and that's something the tribunal to decide. And the key sentence is, a tiny bit, I was like a sentence in it. Now that comes towards the end of the recording. It's been portrayed by the teacher as justification for the argument that somehow Prince Harry didn't do much of this work himself. I have to say, on listening to this tape, it's not that simple.
So on the Richter scale of royal scandals, where does this come in? Well,
I really think that, obviously we're going to see a huge flurry of headlines tomorrow. I think that the tribunal will naturally review the quality of this evidence, and to be frank, I don't think this will really overturn the royal family.
Okay, Richard, thanks very much. Police have been given more time to question a man about the death of 14-year-old. Now, if you're interested in going to university, then maybe you should have to study a foreign language. Here goes. Access benchmarks, performance indicators do not represent quotas. They are benchmarks, a snapshot. Universities will choose their own milestones. Well, all that comes from a speech today by the Higher Education Minister, Kim Howells, and we'll hear from him in a moment. Tomorrow, the government will formally announce who is to head OFFA, the Office for Fair Access to Universities. And it comes on a day on which there's already a deepening row between some top universities and the government. Gillian Lacey-Solomar explains the new language of OFFA.
Go to university, improve your mind. End up earning £400,000 more over your lifetime than non-graduates, and have a breathtaking few years in the process. Who wouldn't leap at this opportunity? No wonder it's controversial who makes it into the ivory tower. And the controversy's been further ignited recently by the changing of benchmarks to determine who can get through those hallowed doors of the top universities. Entry benchmarks used to be based on the grades of the top 3 A-levels you received. No longer. Now they're calculated on tariff points, which are themselves based on the results of many exams over many years. Confused? Well, there's no need to be. The performance indicators in higher education are formulated on entirely objective criteria. This specifies the actual indicator. This shows the proportion of students, and a result of those two, of course, this is the benchmark for an institution. So, what do the mathematics really mean? Well, not a lot of sigmas and clever equations, but simply turning standards on their head, according to the Russell Group, who are the 19 elite universities in the country. They feel the new system, built on what's called UCAS points, is detrimental to their needs.
Well, essentially, the UCAS scheme is open-ended. One can take a large number of different qualifications over a long period of time, and in fact, it's open-ended on time, and score points for each one relative to the level that they're being taken at. So at the end of the process, one might well have an equivalent number of points to, shall we say, 3 A's at A-level. But unfortunately, the difference is in the intellectual capacity that's needed to actually achieve that. I think it's more difficult to actually achieve 3 A's at A-level in a 2-year period than it would be to achieve the equivalent UCAS point scores over, shall we say, a 10-year period.
Politically, however, the setting of benchmarks and the broadening of access was seen as a critical quid pro quo for the introduction of both tuition and top-up fees. The fear from the left was that the high tuition fees charged by the elite universities would deter children from poorer backgrounds from applying. The answer was another regulator. OFFA, the Office for Fair Access, or OFTOF as it's become known, was born. Tomorrow its director will be appointed. His or her remit is to ensure that universities reach out to a broader group. Targets have been set, but many of the universities in the Russell Group are falling far short. For example, Oxbridge and some London colleges are missing the proposed benchmarks by a huge margin. But not all the elite universities have found broadening social access quite as difficult. Some are exceeding expectations.
And this over to there.
But to achieve that, how much positive discrimination is going on? There's certainly a perception that a state education, not a private one, is what opens doors now.
When we did apply, we were actually told to sort of not write that we were from a private school because well, we didn't know at the time, but there could have been some disadvantaged selection towards that.
Another student told us his brother is being moved out from the private sector for the same reason.
He's been to a private school until the age of 16, and then my parents have suggested that he goes to a state school, state sixth form college for A-levels in order to ensure that he has a better chance of being accepted by a good university.
You're assuming that children from independent schools are at a significant disadvantage in this process. All the data we've looked at says that isn't true, and I honestly don't believe that that is going on to any great extent. So this is not about social engineering. This is about brightening up. There are children from state schools with the grades out there that should be going to, by all right, should be getting their fair share of places at these elite universities and aren't. And that's what the argument should be about. It's not about social engineering. It's not about dumbing down.
But fears of dumbing down are exactly what fuels the hostility of the Russell Group to offer. To quell some of that opposition, the Higher Education Minister seems to be making conciliatory noises today. To date, universities have been led to believe there'd be financial sanctions for failing to meet milestones. Now, the rhetoric's different.
They will not automatically be penalised by Offa for failing to meet their milestones, as long as Offa is satisfied that the milestones are stretching and ambitious and that the university has done all it can to meet the milestones. They will be allowed to increase fees.
But the phrase that's worrying is that the Offa is charged with making sure that those universities' own set milestones are sufficiently ambitious and challenging. Now, implicit in that is that there's some notion of what is sufficiently challenging and ambitious. And it's not going to be the university's idea of what's ambitious. It's going to be some national reference to a benchmark, possibly. And so one closes the loop. One's back to national benchmarks as the assessment base that Offa will have to use in order to judge this ambition within the targets that the university sets itself.
So maybe there's no getting away from benchmarks, targets, barometers or milestones. Whatever the semantics, it seems they're a key pillar of the government's aim to build an educated future for the many, not the few.
Well, a little earlier I spoke to the Higher Education Minister Kim Howells in Cardiff and asked him whether the new